presentation. We have a quick 10-minute presentation here from Nicole Craven, who is privacy and marketing consultant from OneTrust. And OneTrust is a company that's done a lot with us over the years at our events, as well as doing some webinars with us and then advertising and marketing on Media Post publications. So we're thrilled to have Nicole here. Nicole, are you there?
I think so. Can you hear me, John?
Yes, I sure can. You sound great.
Thanks.
You know, I couldn't recall. I think the first iteration of this presentation was first-party data, but let me just let you take it from here, because I know you guys wanted to tie into the cookie conversation too. So take it away, my dear.
Yeah, certainly. A lot of things in that last panel that I wanted to touch on, things like progressive profiling and how does consent and preference management tie into that email or known user. So definitely very relevant. I'll go ahead and share my screen now. And
Great.
John, you tell me how it's looking.
If you look good, just go into presentation mode there, and yep, you're looking great. So I think I'll let you pick it up and run with it.
Perfect.
All right.
So thanks everyone for having me. Obviously, this is a sponsored presentation. I work at OneTrust, which is a privacy management company. My background is in ad tech, working at DMPs like BlueKai, third-party data in the data logic space, so certainly can resonate with sort of the fear and pain that a lot of people are facing. Since moving to OneTrust, I was certified in my CIPPE and CIPM. For those of you that are on the ad tech side, which I assume is most, those are just privacy professional standards that the International Association of Privacy puts out. So tests you can take to make sure you're up to speed on things like GDPR and CCPA. So hopefully after this presentation, you guys will feel a little more comfortable about where we think we're headed and maybe how we can help. So I'm going to do a really quick introduction of OneTrust. Then I'll go straight into the privacy and tech landscape, the really big importance of building trust right now, which you just heard every panelist say on the last panel, and then I'll open it up for some questions. So introduction, not to pat ourselves on the back, but this is really just to say that the privacy industry is only growing. So this is my CEO on the cover. We were just named Inc.'s fastest growing company in America. Again, the reason for that is because of all the changes in the privacy and security landscape, the need for both publishers and marketers to get closer to their customers and also make sure they're more comfortable in that value exchange. I think Carrie just kind of mentioned that if you're offering a certain level of content, maybe people are more likely to be engaged. But I think the theme today is that most consumers aren't comfortable with what's happening with their data. So that's how we got to being the fastest growing company this year. In terms of solutions, I would say most of you on the phone are probably very familiar with the CMP or consent management provider. Most of the big publishers, if not all of the small as well, have some kind of CMP stood up on their websites, whether that's the form of a cookie banner or just an opt-out link in their footer. Obviously, every regulation kind of requires a different setup for consent on web. I would say the second level to that is mobile app consent, which most of our really strategic publishers, clients have that set up as well. And now we're moving more into AMP and OTT. From there, privacy rights, I'll go over this quickly unless there's lawyers on the phone. Most of you guys probably won't care too much. The CMP obviously impacts ad revenue and what kind of targeted ads you can serve. So usually the audience for that is ad ops, revenue ops, things like that. Privacy rights is a little more legal, right? Someone asking for access to their data or asking a company to delete their data. And often the legal teams are involved in that, making sure you're providing the right level of data. I think it is really important to still make sure if you're on the customer experience side that this is a good experience. I think the worst case is someone emails a legal at companyxyz.com requesting their data, and then your legal team has no clue where to get that data from, right? It's your customer data in CDP and a CRM system, and maybe even if it's internal, an HR system, and really automating that for your lawyers so that they can stick in their sort of side of the house and the tech team knows where that data is. So making sure there's clear communication there. I think on the second half of this screen is really where people are moving now that CCPA is totally live, GDPR is live. Moving into this cross-device management and making sure that you're not asking people the same questions and making them reshare their preferences when they interact with your brand on web as well as in mobile app, and then for some brands where it's relevant, OTT as well. So how are you going to take those preferences and scale them across platform in a way that makes sense? So that's a huge topic for us right now that we're hearing in the market. That certainly, you know, depends on that ID type that they've given initially, as well as what the publisher or brand has in-house. And the last one is this first party data capture. So you heard in the last panel, everyone kind of talking about everyone trying to gather more first party data. And I think a key piece in that is not forgetting that declared consent. So making sure a user really knows what they're signing up for and that value exchange, right? You're giving me your email address in exchange for free content, or you're sharing your communication preferences, whether that's push notifications, texts, emails, et cetera. You're sharing that in exchange for X, Y, and Z. And so really helping, for me specifically, our publisher clients, figure out the best way to do that, right? Is it a full screen takeover right when you hit the page? Probably not. It's a slow progression of asking consumers questions, having them build out a profile and sort of that sort of workflow. So how did we get here, kind of where we are today, right? I think the consumer expectations are totally misaligned with a lot of the laws and regulations that are out there today. I think obviously there's a lot of gray in all the regulations that are out there. I don't think consumers are reading them or really up to speed on them unless you're in the digital landscape. And even if you are, most people still probably know the bare bones of how those regulations, the privacy regulations, impact their area of business. So really kind of those two misalignments has gotten us here. And then on top of that, browser changes, which everyone on this call is certainly aware of. And then really, how can we start planning ahead? So when we look at the privacy regulations, again, there's tons. CCPA and GDPR are certainly the ones that we hear most about in ad tech, but there's other countries coming out with updated regulations. There's new terminology that everyone kind of needs to know. Am I a consumer? Am I a controller? Am I a processor, et cetera, that we've kind of all had to adapt, even though, you know, like I said, most people on this line aren't going to be lawyers. It's something that we've all kind of had to dig in and learn to ensure that the way we're looking at marketing and the publisher side of the business is still intact while keeping sort of that privacy regulation in mind. And you guys are obviously well aware of all of these changes, the current events, Apple's announcement, Google's announcement, IAB's Project ReArc that they're working on. You know, how's that going to change your current setup today? Third-party data going away, how heavily were you relying on that? How much of that data do you need to shift to either share with someone or build up your own first-party data? And needless to say, with all of those things, the big takeaway is that consumers are not comfortable with how their data is being used. There's some stats that I have up here that I won't read out for you explicitly, but you can see that a large majority of people, you know, are still willing to share their data and kind of lean in more if it means they don't have to pay for something. So maybe for news publishers, a paid subscription works for them, right, to get quality content. We have seen that work in that area, but certainly not for all shapes and sizes of publishers. That's something that really, you know, works for those large sort of recognizable brands. But what are we going to do to help the mid-market and the smaller publishers as well get closer to their consumers and gather that first-party data? The way we kind of look at this is, right, establishing what identifier you're going to use. And we heard in the panel, there's a bunch of different options in the space right now between the trade desk and kind of different vendors there. Is it going to be email that takes over as the main identifier? Obviously, as a privacy company, email has been known to be a source of PII for so long. So that's a little concerning, but whatever identifier kind of your brand and chooses to go with from there, coming up with a strategy of how you're going to progressively profile those site visitors. And that's kind of what I was hinting towards earlier. How are you going to slowly gather information over time that maybe makes up for that reliance on third-party data that you had before? What different types of collection points are you going to set up? And I think, again, one of the questions on the last thing was, is it just newsletters? Or are there other ways we can get clients to sign up, right? Is it taking a poll at the end of reading an article, sharing your preferences, again, about communication, et cetera? And here's kind of an example, obviously OneTrust branded. We didn't want to use one of our clients, but, you know, having a place where they can log in, where all of their privacy rights are managed, their communication preferences, et cetera. And some big publishers have something like this set up today, but certainly not at a transparency level where the brand is talking about why transparency is important to them, a place to kind of explain how they're using the data, as well as a place for people to change things like their cookie settings, request their data, see what data you have on them, et cetera. And all of these seem like big leaps and hurdles, and definitely not where most people were focused. But I think what we're seeing is a lot of strategy happening of how are we going to get here and what are we going to put in place today that shows our users that we're taking this really seriously and that we're not putting it all on them to go read the regulations and figure out what it means for them, but really putting it, maybe like I said, not a full screen takeover right when you hit the page, but somewhere that's pretty easily accessible for your consumers to be able to see and review. And with that, I'll leave you with kind of 4 tips and tricks to take back to your teams. We start with giving users more control, which builds more brand loyalty. Again, this is giving them those options. If we are talking about email, right, it's avoiding that nuclear opt-out of email and instead presenting someone with well, if we're emailing you too much, how often would you like to be emailed and what topics are interesting to you? Would you rather receive a text than an email, and kind of gathering more information that way? But again, giving users that control. The second one, again, avoiding those global opt-outs like I just mentioned, ensuring accuracy through your MarTech stack. So if you are working with someone that's really based on consent, OneTrust being a good example, making sure that that consent is tied to things like your CDP, your CRM systems, your email systems, so that if someone opts out in one place, it's tracked and taken care of in all of those systems. So again, making sure that it's really tied tight. If someone has changed their consent or preferences, that it applies to all areas that your brand is communicating them, and making sure that that's clear to the user of how they can change it. So that's kind of the brief presentation I had to get today. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to take them. Also, if you have questions after this, or you feel like maybe your brand isn't up to speed with where you should be in consent management, happy to kind of run you through best practices we're seeing in market, give you some of our client examples, anything like that. So thanks everyone for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.
Nicole, that's great. Thank you so much. I mean, we so much appreciate these presentations like this, because you actually are the ones in the trenches providing the solutions and the answers to a lot of the problems that that our brands and agency friends who attend these events are having. So thank you for providing a little snapshot into what you guys are up to. And if you'd be willing, we do have to press forward with the program because we are tight on time. But if you'd be willing to put your contact information into the chat box here, then anyone that has any questions or maybe wants more information, they can reach out to you directly there. That would be fantastic. Would you be willing to do that?
Certainly. Thanks so much. I'm happy to do that.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you again, Nicole, for taking the time today. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your continued support in everything we do. And we hope